What's a local legend horror story in your town everyone collectively believes or tells? That our local homeless guy, who was actually pretty famous, was on national TV a couple of times, was secretly a millionaire who went crazy when his wife died. Just a dumb story people tell because they think it's cool even though it's ridiculous. Edit. From all the people who recognized this story. Till every city in the world has their own juggling gim. Now I'm sad. Edit 2. Now I'm not from any of the places suggested. When he died people gave so much money to make sure he had a proper funeral. Made me wonder where they all were when he was alive. We have the Bandage Man. It's basically a story of a guy who either got cut up, fell into a wood chipper, got into a fight with a bear, it really depends on who you ask, and now wanders the woods along the highway, covered in bandages. If you are unlucky enough to pull over, he'll get in your car and kill you. There's an old summer camp far into the woods near my town. Every kid that goes there learns the story of Skibo Bates. When the camp first opened they had a big bonfire for all the kids that night and some of them started picking on poor young Skibo. He gets shoved and trips into the fire which sets his clothes up in flames and he runs from the beach into the large lake the camp was built near. They never found him that night or recovered his body. The counselors all say if you sneak out of your cabins at night Skibo will find you and take his revenge. There are all kinds of people in my part of Texas who swear they've seen a chupacabra. I haven't. But I did once see two enormous cougars jump across the road in front of my car. Chasing a deer. Looked like housegoats. But 8 feet from nose to tail. There is a road on the outskirts of town called Constitution Dr. It is an unpaved road that leads to an old looking farmhouse after about a mile down. The legend is that in this house an entire family of inbred albino people live there and that they will murder anyone who gets too close to the house. It's constantly driven on by teenagers smoking weed and stuff and no one has ever been murdered so. The one time I drove down it however there were a pair of headlights behind my friends and I, which scared the shit out of us and made us turn around. When we turned around the other car was gone that was behind us. It was pretty freaky. It's a very narrow road with a cliff on one side and a steep hill on the other so it's not easy to turn around and disappear. There is a road in a wooded area near where I live and the street is literally called Hairy Man Road. Legend goes that there was a kid who was separated from his family when they were trying to escape some bad weather in the 1800s. He ended up surviving alone in the woods and terrorized people who would come through. Eventually he was trampled to death by some people horses passing by that he tried to scare. I forget how weird the name of the road is until I have to say it out loud. There are hairy man festivals each year in my town. And the hairiest man legit wins a prize. There's an urban legend in my town about a bus full of children in the 70s that went up Gold Camp Road. This narrow, dirt incline into the mountains. And went over the side, killing everyone on the bus. Legend has it that if you drive up that road and park your car where the bus went over the side, you'll get little handprints all over your car from the ghost children. It's amazing to me how many locals still believe this story. There's a rundown mansion outside of the small town I grew up in. Story is back in the day the owners had a massive house party. But the second floor collapsed due to the weight and killed several. The dude who owns it legit lives next to it in a small trailer. The driveway is really long and covered with trees. So we would try to see who could get closest to the house before he noticed and started shooting his rifle in the air. I don't think kids mess with it that much anymore though. If it's that rundown, he probably couldn't afford to fix it and it was cheaper to buy a trailer to live in. I see that a lot with old properties and always think it's a shame. There's this pockmarked ghoul who lives in the woods in my neighborhood. Some believe he preys on teen girls. Most of the time though he drinks alone in his tent. Screaming racist profanities sometimes until 4 AM. We don't know what to do about it. There's this dentist that owns about 18 all black houses in my city and everyone's convinced he is a Satanist. The first clue to me was that he was a dentist. Lol, Wayne Moore. My old landlord. I think more of the urban legends are around him are stuff like if you don't pay your rent on time he will leave a severed pig's head at your front door and he has a throne made out of teeth. I know people have their issues with him. But he left us alone if we left him alone. And we got a discount on rent for cleaning out rentals when people moved out. Some people built a house in our town. It's a waterfront property with a swimming pool for some reason. It's surrounded by security fence and even has spotlights. People in town referred to the place as Mafia Retreat. I met the people who live there. They are the second owners. Although we don't know much about the original owners. The people who live there currently had it officially renamed to Mafia Retreat. Kids would always talk about a bridge called Gibbs Bridge being haunted and they would go there in like middle school to be edgy kids. There were about 1,000 different stories about why it's haunted but everyone claims they've seen ghosts or heard the pickup truck of the dead guy. I crossed the bridge once. It's barely even a bridge and it's just over a tiny creek and it's just full of graffiti and in the middle of the country. Upon further investigation this is more than just a local legend. It's a legitimate place that has been recognized as a very haunted by ghost chasers and such. Last year on Mother's Day a guy walked into my town's only grocery store carrying a severed head. It was his mom's head BTW. He stabbed a worker of the store and went absolutely batty. No matter how many people I explain it to. They all think he was from our little podonk town. He wasn't. He walked about 10-12 miles to take his mom to the store on Mother's Day. It's kinda been a blessing and a curse really. Weird hipsters stay away from our town. Thinking it is filled with nut jobs. While crazy homeless druggies flock to our town like it's Mecca. That the farmers are cannibals. Not sure why this was passed around. The brag lights. Railroad worker was holding a lantern. Fell and hit his head. Got run over, decapitated. Now you see his light as he looks for his head. Except there are no records anywhere of such an incident anywhere near here. There's a rural road just outside of town that people say is haunted. One time some friends and I drove over there and we were driving real slow kinda just giggling and shitty and a cop pulls us over and tells us to leave. I think a lot of teens just go there to smoke and shitty. I've lived in several towns, ones with populations from 100. 0005. 000 people. There's always a group of people, usually moderately successful in business, who party hard together. The rest of the town are convinced there's partner swapping sharing going on at these gatherings. Never been any evidence and no one's seen it but have always heard from a friend of a friend who was at the party. But left when the shenanigans started. Hey, it's probably happened occasionally. But every time? Chapel Hill. TN. The story varies based on who tells it but I'll tell you the gist. Long ago when train tracks had to be manually switched, a switch operator was killed by an oncoming train. Legend has it that to this day you can see him carrying his lantern down the tracks. People have reported it moving through their cars when stopped on the tracks at night. There are videos on YouTube of the light. Chapel Hill is a small town, so the lights from an airplane or lights from cars going X direction don't explain it. Most people around here, if pressed, would tell you they tend to believe it due to so many people experiencing it. The Manchester Pusher. Manchester, England is a city with a large downtown canal and river network. There's an urban legend that a serial killer is active who wanders the city's waterways and pushes people into the water and leaves them to drown. According to the local police, there were 28 unexplained deaths in the water between 2008 and 2014. Family members of some of these victims insist that their loved one's death was no accident, even though the police have written off the pusher as an urban legend. The Hoop Snake. Indigenous to the Mississippi in the Minnesota-Wisconsin area. It's a snake that bites its tail and chases you like a hula hoop. There is this old abandoned underway of this bridge that is supposedly haunted, and if you walk too far in it you'll be cursed. So no one did it for the longest time until some guys at my high school finished the walk, and all it is now is people smoking weed. I don't think it was ever haunted. I just come from a very gullible town. People from St. Louis collectively believe someone in St. Louis invented the crab rangoon, but that's totally untrue. There's one road in the town I was born in that's supposedly one of the most haunted places in New Jersey. It's called Clinton Road. And it's a really long stretch with all forest on one side and a lake on the other with no fence in between or street lights. People have reported seeing headlights behind and then turning around and there's no car there. Seeing phantom hitchhikers, etc. My favorite story though is that there's the ghost of a little boy there that will throw your coins back into the road if you toss them into the lake. One time when my brother and I were little, we threw a coin into the lake to see if it would happen. And my dad noticed, so he slyly threw another one out the window and into the street. We figured it out eventually. So the high school I went to has a trailer with a crawl space under it that is on a hill, so if you go under it from the front and go as far as you can, you'll eventually hit hill. When I was in high school I made up a story to the freshmen who wanted to go under there to smoke that a kid disappeared back there and nobody ever found his body, and it was thought that a hobo or meth head ate him. That scared them and I guess they told their parents or someone at school about it, and the cops came and brought a K9 unit to investigate because apparently there was a missing kid from the school. I wasn't aware. Obviously they didn't find anything. But my nephew goes to that school now, 6 years later, and the seniors still tell the freshmen about the cannibal hobo under the trailer. Guess my story was just feasible enough to stick. I live in a small town in Wisconsin. There's an urban legend my grandparents would tell that supposedly an old crazy farmer had sex with a coyote, thus creating a small coyote man-child that now lives in the woods and eats people's pet cats. The legend is totally fictitious. But when I was young I had a lot of childhood cats go missing and it always scared me lol. Not really a local legend. But the older residents are scared to death of the lake I live on. It's considered two separate lakes, but are hydrologically the same. It's relatively small and separated by a peninsula that juts halfway out into the lake. The one they're afraid of has a steep bank and deepens to 50 feet quickly. The water is an unnatural dark color, almost black, and they absolutely refuse to swim in it. Why they own a home on said lake is beyond me. I don't swim in it not because of the fear, but because the water is absolutely disgusting and has a certain smell. While growing up my small town in the middle of Illinois, 1,200 people, we had a family of Italians move in and start a pizza restaurant. I have traveled a lot in my 30 years. And to this day that pizza was the best pizza I've ever had. Puts all New York pizza to shame. Now, these Italians didn't speak a word of English. Rumor was that when they first opened the store, the local newspaper wanted to write a story on them, and they absolutely refused. Local legend is they are mafia in witness protection. The assassination of President William McKinley at the Pan Am Expo in 1903 cursed the region and led to the Buffalo Bills losing 4 Super Bowls in a row. 1999 Stanley Cup no goal. Nessie Loch Ness Monster. But we only pretend to believe in it for the tourists, which is basically the only industry my village makes money off. I have successfully convinced friends from London that I'm legally not allowed to discuss the existence of Nessie after signing a contract with the FBI when I turned 18. Sam, you do remember that article in the NDA which states you aren't allowed to discuss it on the internet either? We'll be in touch. There's a railroad crossing in downtown San Antonio where supposedly some kids were killed. If you dust your deck lid with flour and park your car on the tracks, the ghosts of the kids will push your car off the tracks, and you'll see their handprints on the car. And if that doesn't work you can get hit by a train and start the cycle again. A lot of my classmates believe that our school was an old Cold War era bunker before being built. My school opened up in 1960. And the only evidence people cite to prove this story is a hatch in the floor of the makeup room for theater kids that no one is allowed to open. Nothing comes up when you search my school about bunkers. So it's safe to say that the legend is not true. You'll never truly know until you open up that hatch. Almost all schools built in that era had fallout shelters built in them. We just had these random weird guys. Mental, not on the good side, so to say. There was the Rainmaker man who would stand on random fields for hours and run toward random people screaming if they came near. He would always do some weird dances and presh tea and every day be at another village. This is why he was called the Rainmaker. The other guy was some boy, he was 19 years old last I heard of him, who would always chase children, and some adults, while having a knife in hand. He carved some figures with that knife and wanted to show off his figures. But he'd always have his knife in the other hand. So he would wait at the bus stop and children get out. They freak out at a guy running with a knife at them and run away, and he runs after them. Both were not dangerous, just creepy AF. They tell that if you stay late at a bar close to the abandoned part of the city, you would notice the figure of a very SI girl trying to make you follow her. She doesn't turn around, neither speak at any time, and is wearing a veil covering her face. You would feel like hypnotized by her perfume and her hips, making you follow her to the most dark part of the town. When you reach a very old and creaky house, she would turn around and reveal her face. And then, suddenly her smell becomes the one of rotten meat and her face would be one full of worm's skull. If you run away, you would be safe, but if she gets to kiss you, you would instantly die and your body would never be found. This one sounds Central South American. Y'all are all about your femme fatale down there. My uni's legend says that whoever eats from the mulberry tree growing behind the linguistics building shall never graduate. And if they graduate, I live about half a mile from a house where a guy killed his parents with a hatchet. When I give locals directions to my house, they say, oh yeah. Old haunted tuberculosis hospital. I've got friends too who live 50 feet from it too. That, and we have haunted bridge. And a road that's famous in town for having a shitty ton of car accidents. Including an accident that I actually got in with friends when I was younger. My town had a haunted house in it. It's not actually haunted. Why I say this? I started the rumor. We were goofing off one night back in high school years and went driving around. We found this old dilapidated house and went spelunking. I took pictures with the flash on just to take pictures. My reasoning was that I wanted to try and capture a ghost. Well, anyways, I take the pictures home and Photoshop a demonic looking ghost face into one of the windows and mass text it to everyone I knew. Word spread that it was haunted, so I played it up. I'd make up stories and say that this guy told me about it. Then when he'd be like, "How I don't remember that," I'd remind him about it. Sure enough, 4-5 elder people in the town have stories about the haunted house. There's a woman in my hometown who is a little strange. She stares at people and acts a little erratically, often having arguments with herself. The apparent story of why she is like that is that she was once very successful in the financial industry, and that one day on her way to getting lunch she got hit by a bus, giving her brain damage. The Banana Fairy. Oh, he is a magical young man who skateboards around town at night in a banana suit and fairy wings and gives those who he deems worthy presents. Mostly drugs, but sometimes snack cakes. I saw him a bunch since I was an avid late night wanderer, but my favorite time was seeing him doing laundry at the laundromat while I was driving to town. I assumed the poor guy had run out of clothes and was forced to don his alter ego attire. Much love, Banana Fairy. That back in the day, people were kidnapped via tunnels under the city and pressed into service as sailors. It's not true. Press gangs were a well-documented thing. As for your particular city, I couldn't really say. The part about the tunnels does sound like bullshit though. Pretty common. It's where the term being shanghaied comes from. A lot of these stories revolve being kidnapped from underground opium dens.